Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the next installment of our Buyer's Perspective webinar series. Today we'll be tackling the topic, how executives compare competing sellers. We all want to avoid competing on price, but what exactly does that mean? Today we'll be talking from an executive's perspective and understand from the other side of the desk how you can compete on value and become more of a partner-based relationship. To share that perspective, I welcome back the host and chairman of the series, Chairman of Executive Conversation, Jim Melillo. Jim's career includes broad CFO experience with both public and private companies within corporate development and treasury, mergers and acquisitions, and financing. Let me share a quick set of logistical details and we'll start the presentation. We'll run about 30 minutes today, at the end of which we'll take as many of your questions as we have time. As questions arise, please enter them in the Q&A box on your screen. Also during this presentation, we'll be asking live polling questions and encourage your participation. Jim, without further delay, let me turn the program over to you.
Eric, thank you so much, and everybody, welcome. It is such a great opportunity to once again be with you. Astonishing. I continue to be amazed. Over 600 registrations for this, and we decided to put up, once again, a picture of everybody that's listening. What amazes me is you have such classic service providers, you have software providers, you have telecom companies, pharmaceutical firms. The topic we're talking about today is critical for success. And what's so great about today's discussion is going to be, it's about you. No, I'm just kidding. It's really about me, as almost all of them are. But in this case, it really is about you from the standpoint of how do you compete. And then the question becomes, within that, how do you compete? How do you differentiate yourself? And so we're going to look at it from both ways, both from your standpoint, your competitors, and from my standpoint. What do I look for in the process of working with a supplier, working with a vendor, working with a partner? So for me, I am concerned about how do you all come to me and how do you all show up at my business. For you, of course, you care about your competitors. We're going to talk about that in a minute because I think you're going to get an idea that your competitors are a lot different from my way of thinking than who you think they are. And this is not the same. Competition for me is about me. We know that. We also know that for you, you're looking at your competitors. So the first poll, and as everybody knows, these are 45-second polls. The first poll, and please go to your computer and vote. For those of you that are driving, I'd like you to beep your horn. So if you think the following is truly found in a DEF 14A, if it's A, I will find the management discussion and analysis in that. Beep your horn once. 2, provides an understanding of the income statement. Choose B. It provides compensation metrics. Choose C. And always allows the segment analysis within the company. Choose D. So which one of these 4 do I find in a DEF 14A? As you know, we only have 15 more seconds to vote. We move this along. The reason we're asking everybody to vote here is because we're going to talk about how this type of thinking integrates into the competitive model. So we're going to shut down the poll. We're going to take a look at the results. And what we're going to do now is talk about how does this document, as well as other documents, impact this. So, Eric, do you have some results?
Jim, we have perhaps the most evenly split set of results we've ever had for a poll. From top to bottom, we range from 24% to 32%, so pretty much 1/3 to 1/4 across the board.
So we'll just put numbers like that. So I want to congratulate the 28% of the people that got it correctly. The DEF 14A is the second most important document. As a result of that, what we're looking for is the ability for you to work with me on my business. Now, everybody knows the 10K, but the proxy, the DEF 14A, is critical to having a discussion with me. It provides an insight into my compensation. It provides an insight into the metrics. And it provides those metrics which the board has chosen to focus on with the executives. What are the strategic direction we drive the company? And so when I've spoken to any one of the 20-some-odd executives in our company, every one of them felt that we need to have more partners coming to us and sharing with us this information. We are always frustrated that less than 5% of the people understand not so much the metrics, but how it gets to be strategic. So let's take a look at the two ways I use competition in buying. So one is, first of all, price. And as everybody knows, you either bring value or you bring price to a customer. It's that simple. It's the way I see the world. When you bring price to me, depending on the type of company I am or you are, there are three different ways I look at that. One, price cutters tend to come in. They're the low-cost alternative, tend to be with the small, medium business model. They tend to have the generic products, and as such, there's no value established, distribute through wholesalers and the like. Two, mid-tier players. These are the ones that are coming, and the pricing tends to muddy the waters within that. And then as they roll, these groups of companies roll up into the enterprise, that what they basically do is come with a low service component, low value, and a lot of times they will cherry pick parts of the solution in order to confuse the buyer. An example of that would be who should compete on price. If you have the following characteristics, it's okay to be a vendor. It's okay to compete on price. You have high gross margins. You have the lowest cost model. You have old factories, low R&D, G&A, and infrastructure. If that's the description of your company, price is your friend. If it's not, if you don't have 4 out of these 6, you're going to have a real hard time being successful. So let's take a look at the ways in which we view competition, more from your side. So, Amarillo Slim, great saying, always loved it. My take on it is a little different. Maybe not 10 days, but if you don't know who the partner is on the deal, then you know what? You're the vendor. If you're not the partner early on, you're the vendor. If you don't come in to talk to me as a partner, you're the vendor. So how do I buy based on value, since that's really what we want to know? That's the most important part. And so we're going to go over to the 3 areas that create value within our conversation. One is the provocative ideas. Second one is the consumption model that's been changing. And the third one is business alignment. Within the new ideas, the provocative ideas, the challenge model has talked around this. You need to understand how your ideas change the face of the competition. As people have heard before, in my career, I built 2.5 factories. One in Ireland, one in Puerto Rico, and rebuilt one in the Midwest United States. That's my experience. I put in 3 IT systems in my whole life. I have undertaken and brought to the United States 5 drugs in my whole life. How many customers have you called on? How many solutions have you proposed? Is it more or less than 2.5? Is it more or less than 3? As many of you know, I'm sure it's in the hundreds. So if my experience is 2.5 and your experience is the hundreds, why is the conversation not around the new idea, not the new product, not the new service, the new idea you're bringing to me about my company? Because after all, we know who it's about. The great news is that when we engage at this level, your competitors, this space is blank, your competitors are going to come in at the product set, not changing my business. So where do I see these provocative ideas, and how do I see them playing out? Well, You can bring them in because they link to the external issues and the initiatives that are so critical to me. In addition to me, this different idea which concerns my core business. We're not talking about a provocative idea around bandwidth. We're not talking about a provocative idea around nano something for technology measurement. We're talking about a provocative idea that gets to the core of our research and development, our manufacturing, our healthcare provisions, et cetera. And that's why I don't delegate, and that's why I know we can't do it ourselves. And thus you become top of mind. Thus you become credible at not only my level, but my direct reports level, and possibly even above me to the board. And so these ideas, these provocative ideas, as we call them, are critical to the beginning of having a valuable conversation. And what do you want me to think about? Well, you want me to be thinking not so much about just the idea, but what is the business change? How do I see the future changing? What is going to be my ability to change my market share relationship? How will I be able to take this concept and roll it out to my sales, to my cost, to my research, to my future groups? You need to think about, how do I get out of this CIO rut? How do I get out of the purchasing rut? How do I move to the chief marketing officer, the chief medical officer? This becomes the entrance. And this entrance comes out of these ideas. There are tons of them. Great phrase, take the lead in helping to grow my business. Take the lead to grow my business. What a great way for you to approach me. When you do that, you have the opportunity to expand your discussion. As everyone knows, we are constantly trumpeting this message, both at SAMA, online, social media. Sign up. It's a great way to refresh your information as you go along. The second way is around new consumption models. And this has happened most likely on and off for the last 20 years, but pretty strong in the last 4. As we've started coming out of the recession, what we've begun to see is there's a need for a new consumption model. We have the traditional business model of costs are here, revenue is there, and the delta is my margin. Not a big deal. What's a big deal is reducing the risk of this model. And that is what the new consumption model is around. It's around risk application. Because how do I know my revenue is going to do that? How do I know it's not going to do this? And when it does that, if I have a cost model, that's what the recession looked like. As we had dips in the recession, my profits turned to massive losses. And so people began to take a look at, how do I build a new consumption model that works with this? Well, for many companies, it's become a core way to procure. You begin hearing terms like, we're thinking of moving expenses from CapEx to OpEx. Now, that phrase is a dummy phrase. We're moving things from CapEx to OpEx is a dummy phrase. What it really means is we are changing the way we run our core business, and we need help. It is not about taking money out of CapEx and putting it into OpEx per se. That is just one of the hints to we're looking for a different way to change our business model. And as such, we're looking possibly to more closely align, reduce the risk of cost versus revenue. And what are some of the reasons or some of the indicators that I could give you when I talk to you about that? Well, we might say we're looking for a lower upfront cost. We're looking for a shorter ROI. We're looking for the ability to catch more of the life cycle management so that we don't overbuild going into the growth phase and then get stuck with stranded assets as we're sitting in the plateau to the slowly declining stage. What we're looking for is someone that understands all of this and can come to me with the provocative idea and the financial understanding of my business and put it all together. When you take a look at that's your job, for some of you, you begin to wonder, God, life was so much simpler before this call. My God, I wish I hadn't gotten on this webinar because I knew if I just sold and hit my number, I was going to have 2.4 kids, 1.5 dogs, 3.6 station wagons, whatever it was that you were going to call success under a traditional model is unfortunately going to get whittled away, get marginalized. I can't afford to make those large projects as a standalone piece of technology, real estate, investment in formats and the like. I need something that aligns with my business model, aligns with my lower risk profile, and also possibly aligns with my cash flow. Now, that last statement is a fascinating statement for me to make because the estimate right now is that there's $1 trillion, not sure I believe it, but when you've got a large number of firms sitting on 50 to 100 billion, it doesn't take a lot to get there, that there's $1 trillion sitting in the Fortune 1000 in the bank. So if you're sitting on a massive amount of cash, some companies have up to 100 billion now in excess cash, why would you not want CapEx? After all, you have tons of capital. It's getting 0%. How much do you get from your savings and checking account? Well, guess what? Even the really smart corporations are only probably earning a half point more than you are, maybe 0.75% more. So if you're getting 0.5%, they're getting 1.5%. Basically zero in an inflationary environment. Why, if I have $1 trillion, would I be looking to shift my model? And the answer is it's around the business risk, which is not like this. The business sales are like this. I'm looking for a cost model that looks like this, that creates that continuous, predictable profitability. And so that's one of the reasons why I've taken this massive shift. We've seen products that talk to this. They call them on-demand, the cloud. They talk about leasing structure on a per-unit basis, price per. And as you take a look at these, you basically begin to see the need for you to change your discussion with me. The question is, can you? What we have done in trying to answer that question is we have, as some of you know, maybe many of you do, we've built assessments that we have now, I would guess we're somewhere north of 40,000 assessments we've done, probably under 50,000. The two trends that come out in the assessment that prevent people from having this conversation is, one, they find themselves thinking they're up here, but they're actually scoring down there. This thing we call the danger zone is when you show up, you make statements, or you make proposals which I as an executive recognize are just wrong. You know, Jim, we're going to increase cash flow by driving up revenue. You know, that's intellectually correct at 17 steps down the road, but the more correct statement is, you know, Jim, we're going to look to shorten your inventory, which will free up cash. Now I get it. When you don't understand what the business ideas and the financial ideas are, you fall into that danger zone. And so the second part of this discussion is really quite simple. It's how do you move up? How do you move from here to here? Now, we recognize one size doesn't fit all. You have to move up, most likely, from where you are. Here is this line down here. For those of you who have taken it, no, this is where the telesales people live. This is where we live. This is where, when you have 5 to 15 accounts live, this is where, when you have 50 to 100 accounts live, that's where your score should be. The vast majority of people, and you can see what the average looks like here, are barely high-quality telesales capable. Now, again, I'm sure you're different than the other 40 to 50,000 people The question is, are you fluent enough to have this conversation? Because without that conversation, how are you going to establish business alignment with me? Seriously, think about it. How are you going to have business alignment? How are you going to have a conversation around the new consumption models, around the business ideas behind the consumption models here at the hospital, here at the manufacturing plant, here at my telecommunications company? How are you going to have that conversation unless you have the knowledge? Would you really start a sport at an advanced amateur level, never having played before? Would you want to go up and play against 3 handicapped golfers, people that are playing at the 1 to 2 level in tennis? It makes no sense. Why would you try to then take your career? Remember, we got to support those 1.5 dogs and those 2.3 station wagons. If you don't feel comfortable with this business alignment. So as we look at the business alignment, we know that the value of the business alignment is really quite simple. Partners are aligned with my business. Everybody else is a vendor. And I'm looking for those people. On the basis of the projects, I'm looking for a partner. If you don't become a partner, guess where I spent in excess of $150 billion last year? Take a look at the size of some of these companies. Some of them are integrators, IBM Global Services, Capgemini, but take a look at Hewitt, BCG. We don't even have Bain in here, Accenture. These are people who showed up because you didn't show up with business capabilities, business confidence. These are the people I hired because you didn't have that conversation with me. Do you really think, I mean, I started out, my first job out of university was at BCG. I know what we did. Do you really think later on as a CFO, my go-to solution was, let's hire a company that's going to give me 70 pieces of paper and I'm still going to have the problem? And oh, by the way, that's going to cost me between $1 and $5 million. Or would I rather spend the $1 to $5 million on solving the problem? I'm not stupid. I know that when I hire a consultant, I'm going to get a book. When I hire you, I'm going to get a solution. But if you don't have the ability to have this conversation, to have the provocative idea, to be able to talk to me about the new economic model, I have to buy the book. And by the way, that $5 million comes out of the price of your solution. The good news for you is I'm a loyal buyer. I've always been a loyal buyer. I look to the people who have changed my business because it makes no sense for me. I'm not loyal out of some Boy Scout concept. When you come to me and you get out of HR, when you get out of IT, when you get out of pharmacy, when you get out of that low-level procurement conversation, and you talk to me about how your pharmaceuticals, you talk to me about how your products, services, software, solutions change my cost of goods formula in the bricks. You talk to me about how you reduce my time to market to R&D. These then become my critical conversations with me. When you do that, then I know with that I can grow sales. I can succeed in changing my cost structure. I can move forward towards new products and taking market shares. I win, I. These are the things that make me and you successful. You need to understand me. You need to understand what's going on with my business. You need to understand the new economic model. Understanding why I'm buying is more important than what you're selling. I know some people hate hearing that, but that's the truth. We just recently were working on a project with a company in which one of the people came up and said, look, I'm 53 years old. My life would have been so different if you had been here 25 years ago. Now, I thought that was a wonderful thing to say. This person has a $400 million quota. This person and their team are not somebody who's been selling a low-value product their whole life. And yet he saw how different having this conversation was in working with some of the largest companies as well as working with smaller companies. So I'm going to turn it back to Eric and have a chance to answer as many questions as we can get to. Eric?
Jim, excellent presentation. And as always, in just 30 minutes, we're only able to touch the tip of the iceberg, as there's so much more to talk about on this. And for all of you out there that might be wondering, how do you stack up? Jim referenced our Fluency Assessment earlier in this session. We've compiled thousands of data points of those that you actually are competing against. And these assessments are segmented by your role, whether you're calling on government accounts, whether you're calling on direct accounts, managed channels, responsible for different regions internationally. If you'd like to assess your team and understand where do you stack up currently, please reach out to us at the information that you see on the screen, and we'd be happy to take that next step with you. Jim, let me get to a few questions that came in during the session in the time that we have left. First off, the poll sparked a whole number of people inquiring, what exactly is a DEF 14A?
Well, short of spending 2 days with me, a DEF 14A is the second largest document I will file. It is also known as a proxy in the U.S. It is known as a corporate governance section in Canada, Europe, and Asia. And it effectively lays out the strategic metrics of the organization, whether they be compensation-oriented or whether they're based on asking for shareholder votes. But effectively, I'm going to you. I tend to write it as the CFO, or I oversee it, I should say. And we're going to you as shareholders and saying, here's the way we're going to compensate our people based on cash flow, return on assets, EVA, et cetera. Second of all, here's why. And third of all, here are the major decisions we're asking shareholders to vote on. So that's what a DEF 14A is, and that's what it does.
We also had quite a few questions. I'm paraphrasing here. Early on, you talked about price-based competition. What does that mean from your perspective, Jim, in terms of at the enterprise level, how big of an issue price-based solutions become?
Well, I think what we see at what I saw at the enterprise level is people who didn't have complete solutions and weren't able to establish themselves as part of a total solution. I'm not talking about companies that are not as big as IBM or not as big as Herbst or is not as big as total solution providers. I'm talking about people that are these smaller competitors that come in and they can only get part of a deal. Instead of becoming strategic oriented, possibly partnering with the larger vendor, possibly working with a system integrator, instead they come in, they talk about how they have superior speeds, capabilities, and cheaper. And so what happens is a $10 million, $20 million purchase starts getting bogged down with a whole bunch of $500,000 distractions. And finally, purchasing, if that's where you get stuck in, starts rolling up a bunch of these $500,000 distractions and telling you your deal doesn't make sense. One of the reasons you've got to sell that value at the senior level is you've got to have that alignment with the buyer, and those of you who have heard that webinar know what that means, alignment with the buyer such that it makes no sense for them to get individual components that are cheaper and, quote, faster because you risk the entire project at that time.
Also a series of questions around when you talked about an accelerating pace of change in terms of consumption models, business models, particularly in the last 4 years, what are some examples of where that's taking place?
Well, I mean, one has to only look at their personal phone to take a look at where that's taken place. You then take a look at the capabilities that that provides, and that has taken place. You then take a look at the strain that is put on corporations. That has taken place. In the pharmaceutical industry, we have had a huge change in the revenue model. Traditionally, the pharmaceutical industry was built on proprietary drugs. And a good simple number is 10 years ago, there were approximately 26 proprietary blockbusters that were brought to market, and it cost roughly $26 billion of R&D to do that. This last year, there were 27 brought to market, and the number was $63 billion to get those 27 to market. Massive increase in cost, minimal increase in new drugs brought to market. So again, in the last 4 to 5 years, the pharmaceutical industry has seen this dramatic shift, and thus they need to change their cost model. Regardless of whether it's phones, which are driving revenue growth for many people, or pharmaceuticals, which are just doing the opposite, driving costs, totally new business models, and people are trying to rejigger, reanalyze their underlying business and make changes. They're looking for partners to do it.
We've reached the top of the hour, so I will just limit it to the last couple questions I'll select here, Jim. The first one here is asking your opinion about buying shares in a public company before meeting with the CFO. The idea being you can approach the conversation differently as a shareholder, talking about how you'll assist the company, lower costs, improve cash flow, et cetera, and ultimately raise share prices. Thoughts on that?
Our company has always purchased shares in all of their customers, and we've done very well. But when you come in and you say to me, as I was sitting in the shareholder meeting, here's what I heard, which is where I will share this, or as a shareholder, I routinely read your presentations to the street or to the FTSE or to the DAX, you have a radically different opening line versus in looking at your annual report. Whole different mentality for both you and for me.
And lastly, when selling to smaller or mid-sized businesses as opposed to the enterprise space which you referenced, are you expecting sales professionals to be equipped with this same level of insight?
No, not at all. What I'm expecting is different levels. And so if you're selling to the SMB market, I expect you to understand my industry really well, and I expect you to understand nothing about me specifically. Let me give you an example. I expect that if you're selling to community hospitals, community banks, community manufacturers and the like, and you have a regional territory, I expect you to understand banking, healthcare, and manufacturing. As far as me, relative to all of that, your score should be low. And I would suggest to you that your industry score should be as high almost as a strategic account manager. And the great thing for you is once you learn about one hospital, you've got 30, 40 community hospitals in your region. You've got 20, 30 regional banks and credit unions. You've got 50 to 100 manufacturers. I expect high scores there, low scores about me. I'm privately held. I don't share much information. And a good understanding of the financial structure of that industry. You become a consultant in a minute to me, and you become a partner really quickly because I see no one like you in my history of talking to sellers.
Jim, thank you, and thank you everyone for attending. Again, the offer to take a look at assessing your team, we would look forward to taking that next step with you. To help circulate the idea, you will be receiving a link to a recording of this webinar, and you're certainly encouraged to share that with your colleagues unable to attend today's session. Jim, thanks again for a great presentation. This concludes today's webinar.
Thank you.